Welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin, and I'm joined by my dear friend and co-host, Dr. Sylvia Bank. Between our two households, we're navigating life with 10 children, so we know how chaotic parenting can be. As Johns Hopkins trained pediatricians, we also know the science. Our goal is to bring you the best of both worlds, medically sound, trustworthy advice, and practical, real-world insights as we dive into the trials and triumphs of parenting. Please note this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor. Hi, and welcome back. We are joined again today by Dr. Scott Krugman. He is a fellow Johns Hopkins trained pediatrician and the dean of a regional medical school campus with the George Washington University School of Medicine. Welcome back to our show, Dr. Krugman.
Thanks for having me back. My name is Scott Krugman. I am a general pediatrician and a child abuse pediatrician who's been in practice since 1998 after my residency. I have been doing inpatient, outpatient, nursery, some emergency pediatrics for most of my career, and spend some time doing child abuse consults in the hospitals that I work in. I've raised 2 boys who are now grown, and I am a third generation pediatrician where I was raised both as with an infectious disease grandfather, so I got every single vaccine often early and some before we're even licensed, and a child abuse pediatrician dad where I had stories of abused kids growing up at the dinner table. So that's kind of warped and just made me who I am today.
Dr. Krugman, I would love for our listeners who are watching on YouTube, obviously you have this bandage on your forehead. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a week ago I had a basal cell carcinoma removed by the dermatologist. Fortunately, they got it on the first thing, but then they had to sew me up nicely with the plastic surgeon to make a nice scar that has to be covered for the first week, and tomorrow I get my stitches out and I would not look quite as annoying. But make sure you do your skin screening, especially if you grew up in Colorado in the 70s and 80s.
Yes. Well, I'm glad they got it all, and plug for skin cancer prevention living in South Texas. Oh my gosh, my kids hate sunscreen and the amount that I tell them to put it on all the time.
So today we are going to be highlighting an illness caused by meningococcus. So the reason why we're highlighting this illness today is in December 2025 and January 2026, the ACIP, or the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, changed the recommendations of some vaccines, where they used to be on the universal routine immunization schedule for children, and then instead they created a special category called immunizations that are given and decided under shared decision making between the clinician, which is your doctor, and the patient. And we want to highlight meningococcal illness today and to inform patients why they should choose to immunize their child against meningococcus.
Yeah, let me do some explanation just to make sure we're all on the same page. We refer to this vaccine as Meningococcus because this particular bacteria, when you look under the microscope, is a cocci. It's a little circle. If you've taken microbiology, you remember that, Meningococcus. The fancy name for that bacteria is Neisseria meningitidis. We refer to that as the meningitis vaccine. That's a little bit of a misnomer because if you've listened to other episodes, you're informed enough to know that many bacteria can cause meningitis. This just happens to be a particularly severe, aggressive bacteria that causes meningitis and has it in its name. So we may use those terms interchangeably, meningococcus, Neisseria meningitidis, the meningitis vaccine. It's all referring to the same thing, this particular very bad bacteria.
This is actually given in 2 separate immunization series. One of them is called MenACWY or MenACWY, and that covers most of the strains of meningococcus, A, C, W, and Y strains. And that shot is given at the 12-year-old visit and boosted at the 16-year-old visit. There is another meningococcus vaccine that covers the meningitis B strain, and that one is offered sometime in the 17 to 18-year range, and it's 2 immunizations given 6 months apart. So why don't you tell us your thoughts on meningococcus?
Yeah, again, I think what we talked about was this is a parent's worst nightmare when they send their kid off to college and there's a meningitis outbreak on campus and all of a sudden 10 kids are sick in the hospital and 2 of them die because it's a fast-moving, the deadliest, scariest bacteria we could come up with, and it's one that makes all pediatricians quake when you hear fever and a rash that doesn't blanch. And it can go from, I feel a little flu-like, to dead in 6 hours. So it is a horrible disease, and even if you survive, your risk of having limb amputations or hearing loss is very large. And it's just one of those illnesses that's so bad, even though it's not that common, that if you can prevent it, you should prevent it, right? I mean, nobody wants to be in the hospital with meningitis and sepsis and having a near-death experience. So the vaccines have been progressing, and we finally now have one vaccine that covers all of the different strands, and in 3 shots you're protected against all of them as your child goes into a dorm at the highest risk period. And to me, that should be the recommendation. The evidence that these things work is huge. I think there was just a college campus outbreak like a few weeks ago that I came across one of the news feeds.
So recently this year, there was a outbreak of serogroup B meningococcal disease. So this is the meningitis B disease, and it actually occurred in the United Kingdom, and it was linked to actually a nightclub called Club Chemistry. And that outbreak of someone in Club Chemistry who had meningitis B disease and spread it to other people at that nightclub led to at least 20 cases of infection, 11 plus hospitalizations, and 2 deaths due to meningitis B. So the deaths was in one of the University of Kent students, an 18-year-old student from a local school actually died from meningitis B from this contagiousness from this club. And this is the meningitis B vaccine that we offer to all college kids at the 17, 18-year-old physical as they're going to college. So if your child was in college and visiting this Club Chemistry and they had the meningitis B vaccine, they would have been protected from this outbreak and potential death from the disease, right?
Yeah, 2 deaths in 20 known cases. That's such an exceptionally high mortality or death rate. Like we've highlighted, meningococcus is just so scary.
And then this at-risk age group is these teenagers, as they're in their university setting. These are the lives that are taken from us when meningococcal disease strikes, right?
Again, this is such a deadly and horrible disease. Why would anybody want to risk it? It just makes zero sense at all.
Yeah, I think of my 4 or 5 top illnesses in the practice of medicine where you literally, as the physician, can have so little warning from the time that a child presents as starting to get sick to death or severe sequelae like you talked about. And Meningococcus, this is the bacteria that's treated by the meningitis vaccine, is high on that list for me. I've had the scenario twice in the emergency room where a child was seen earlier in the day at a different facility, diagnosed with a viral illness, fever, otherwise looking well.
That's what they look like.
And then came in with purpura. There's this classic rash with meningococcus. It's almost like blood pooling underneath the skin, and then went from ICU to death within a few hours. And it's forced me to look back and think, like, what if I had seen that child a few hours ago? What would I have done? Would I have done anything differently? And I can't reconcile that I may not have, that this was just how meningococcus behaves. It can so fool you. And I want to make another couple points with that. And that's that the other problem with it is that when you're exposed to meningococcus, you may not necessarily know, because for so many people, it does just behave like that.
Yeah, it can be more asymptomatic for some people, so it can spread. And I think it's important to note that there aren't very many diseases where we go back and treat everyone who's been around them. But meningococcal is one of them. Hib, which we talked about before, is another. Pertussis is another. There are a few where you might have it and you don't even know it. So if you've been exposed to somebody with it, you should be on treatment for that to prevent it. So it just highlights how severe it is, but you can't rely on that as your protective mechanism because, again, you might not know you were exposed, right?
Right.
That's the biggest risk.
Yeah, to clarify, I think the scenario that we're most used to is if in those settings, like in the emergency room, if we have a child who comes in who is ultimately diagnosed with meningococcus, everyone who is in that room gets treated, right? You know you've been exposed. That's a unique setting where we have the data to know that we were exposed, but out in the community, you don't have that, and so you don't know. And meningococcus is so scary. I have also had the unfortunate scenario where I had a patient who lived but had significant sequela of their meningococcus, and the parents, years later, I was seeing them years later, but they still had on their phone ready to pull up the video of that child just a few hours before they came into the emergency room with meningococcus, and the child was out in their yard sprinkling the water hose, running around, playing, looked totally fine, right? Just devastating how quickly this bacteria acts and how it's so hard to predict, and we don't have time to react when it happens to react in that really aggressive way in one child over another.
No, you can't predict it, and you can't rely on having enough time to do something about it. And that's why it's just one of the most devastating things, and why it was a required school vaccine for middle school, right? That's on the list, right? Meningitis, tetanus booster. Those are the two. So
yeah. And I'd like to point parents to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is always a leader in pediatric research, and they have a website called Parents Pack Personal Stories Meningococcus. On this website, you can read the stories of parents talking about their children who died from meningococcus and really describing what we've tried to describe for you, that they went from being healthy to dying in less than 24 hours because this bacteria can invade so quickly without any warning.
It's devastating, right?
Devastating.
And it should cause fear in parents when they think about meningococcus, right?
Right. Like it causes fear for us. And the other bacteria can give me a little bit more time to treat a patient. But if it's meningococcus, I know that I'm racing against time, if not already too late.
Yeah, and how many adolescents and young adults are getting sick with the flu? All the kids in high school are sick at that time. Imagine if that wasn't just some cold or virus, but that was meningococcus that they were all getting. That is just my biggest nightmare, like a huge fear, right?
I fully agree.
Yeah, I think the biggest controversy or the biggest argument that I see online against this vaccine is that some argue that the meningococcal disease is very rare in countries like the US. So many people see vaccination as unnecessary or overkill, right? Like that is what people are saying, that's the discussion that we engage in. Right?
I mean, it's rare until it happens, right? And if we could predict when it would or where it would, it'd be one thing. It's not like flu where there's millions of people that get it every year, but the death rate is not like the flu. It's so much worse. And again, getting back to the very, very original point is there's a reason certain diseases are picked for vaccines, right? No one's picked rhinovirus, the cold virus, for a vaccine because it's self-limited, it's mutating a lot. But there's a reason they picked meningitis and Hib. It's because they're devastating infections. Why would you not want to protect yourself against that?
Thank you so much for that discussion. Today we were talking about meningococcus, which is covered by the meningitis vaccine given in adolescents. We hope that this has equipped you as a parent to be able to participate as a knowledgeable person in that informed decision-making with your doctor when you're making decisions about the best care for your child.
So I want to thank you, Dr. Krugman, for coming on our show today and sharing your pediatric knowledge and medical knowledge with our listeners. It's really great to have you back.
Thanks for having me. It's a very fun time, and it's great to be able to get information right to parents.
This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin.
I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Scott Krugman.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.